So we're going to continue with the 6th chapter of The Wolves of Willoughby Chase by Joan Aiken. The girls, Bonnie and Sylvia, are being sent away from the chase to a school of some sort. We will pick up there. Sleepy and shivering, they hardly had the strength to protest when Mr. Grimshaw, who was there, hoisted each into the carriage and then handed up Miss Slycarp, who sat grimly between them. "Well, a pleasant journey, ma'am," he cried gaily. "Mind the wolves don't get you, ha-ha!" "I'd like to see the wolf that would tackle me," snapped Miss Slycarp. And then, to James on the box, "You may start, sirrah!" They rattled out of the yard, and were soon crossing the dark, snowy expanses of the park. They had gone about a mile when they spied the lights of another carriage coming toward them. It drew to a halt as it came abreast of them. "'Tis the doctor, ma'am," said James. "Young ladies," said Miss Slycarp sharply. They caught sight of her face by the swaying carriage light. The look on it was so forbidding that it made them shiver. "One word from either of you, and you'll have me to reckon with. Remember that you are now going to a place where Miss Green of Willoughby Chase is not of the slightest consequence. You can cry all day in a coal cellar, and no one will take notice of you. If I choose that it shall be so. Hold your tongues, therefore. Not a sound from you while I speak to the doctor." "Is that Miss Slycarp?" the doctor called. "Dr. Morn, what brings you out at this time of night?" She spoke with false cordiality. "I received a strange message, ma'am, most strange. A blank sheet of paper and an urgent summons to the chase. Is everybody ill? Can nobody write?" "Oh, doctor," she said as sweet as syrup, "I'm afraid it must be some prank of those dreadful children. They are so naughty and high-spirited." Here she gave both children a fierce pinch. "There is nobody ill at the chase, doctor. I most deeply regret that you should have been called out for nothing. Let me give you 10 guineas instead of your usual fare." There was a chink of coins as she leaned out of the dim coach and obscured the doctor's view of its interior. He rumbled dissatisfied. "Very odd, very odd. Can't say it's like Bonnie to do such a thing. Must be the other little minx. Don't care for being called out on false errands. However, very kind of you, ma'am. Say no more about it." Still grumbling to himself, he turned his horses. Miss Slycarp gave him a few minutes' start and then told James to make all possible speed toward Blackburn. The rest of the journey was passed in silence. Both children were utterly cast down at this failure of their plan, and Bonnie was almost numb with grief and despair over the news about her parents. Try as she would to control herself, tear after tear slipped from under her eyelids, and the utmost that she could achieve was that she wept in silence. She was too proud to let Miss Slycarp guess her misery. Sylvia guessed it, and longed to comfort her, but the bony bulk of the governess was between them. Long before the end of the trip, they were almost dead of cold, and their feet were like lumps of ice, for Miss Slycarp had all the fur carriage rugs wrapped around herself, and the children had to make do without. They were too cold for sleep, and could almost have wished for an attack by wolves. But save for an occasional distant howl, their passage was undisturbed. It seemed that Miss Slycarp was right when she said the wolves feared to attack her. At last they drew near the great smoky lights and fearsome fiery glare of Blackburn, where the huge slag heaps stood outlined like black pyramids against the red sky. They clattered through a black and cobbled town, where the people seemed to work all night, for the streets were thronged, although it was so late, and presently drew up a dark street on the farthest outskirts. Miss Slycarp alighted first, and Sylvia had just time to breathe hurriedly to James as he lifted her down. "You'll tell Pattern where we are, James. She'll be so worried." And to receive his nod before the governess pushed them along a narrow gravel path toward the front door of a high, dark house. She rang the bell, whose echoes were heard far within, harsh and jangling. Almost at once the door flew open. And that is the end of chapter 6.